and welcome to Scott's Odyssey, a channel dedicated to taking you to locations that are off the beaten path. Today we are in beautiful Huntingdon County and we are going to visit an odd little all but forgotten graveyard known as the McGuire Cemetery. The McGuire Cemetery is located on McGuire Road in Huntingdon County, very, very close to where the McGuire Massacre happened. But before we start down this little path, let's get a little history of why this is so important. Let's begin. The year was 1755, 1 year after William Penn successfully purchased the land of Pennsylvania from the Indians.
Just as a side note, William Penn actually executed the purchase through deed in 1686 with the Lenape Indians. He died in 1718 before the transaction was completed. The purchase was re-executed by deed in 1737 through his sons John and Thomas Penn. T.D. Uskung, a Lenape Indian diplomat, validated the agreement to the walking purchase, given to Thomas Penn the sovereign authority in 1755 during a treaty conference in eastern Pennsylvania.
It was 1 year into the French and Indian War. Central Pennsylvania sat right on the edge of disputed territory for that war. As you can see, it's a beautiful forest. Back at that time, the most abundant animals in this forest were deer and wolves. Many of these local trees, not necessarily these guys, they're a little bit young, but some of the bigger, older trees had different tribal carvings on them, marking the borders for the Allegheny, Tussey, Tuscarora, the Juniata, the Alwick, and the Warrior Ridge tribes of Indians. One of the blazed trees had the symbol of a half moon, marking the location of the Half Moon Valley and the Half Moon Run, now called Half Moon Township, located over on the other side of this Tussey Mountain in Center County. The very first settler of the area, Peter Shaver, settled at the head of a stream now known as Shaver's Creek in 1755. Peter was a licensed Indian trader and a son of Hans Peter Shaver, also licensed in 1744 as an Indian trader from Fredericktown, Maryland. He was also employed by the Pennsylvania Colonial Council as a scout to the Indians. From 1744 to 1755, there was another licensed Indian trader who was friends with Hans. They shared the same route. His name was John Hart, but more about him in another video when we discuss Hart's log. Story goes, Peter took his horses out to pasture for the night. It was twilight, he goes out there, puts them out to pasture, and he doesn't come home. Nobody thinks anything of it. Well, lo and behold, when it came time for breakfast, Peter didn't show up. So the family got a little bit nervous about it. They formed a search party. They went out to look for Peter and found Peter. Where they found him was a little lane next to the pasture. All but his head. A reward for 50 pounds was put out for the return of Peter's head. That's a lot of money. Today, 50 pounds is about $2,600. That could have got you a whole lot of everything. Could have gotten you your cows, your feed, everything. Unfortunately, the perpetrators were never found. Neither was the head of Peter Shaver ever returned. Initially, Indians weren't to blame. They weren't renowned for cutting people's heads off, but they were renowned for scalping people, even in this area during that time. But not blaming the Indians did not last very long. Not a short time after this incident took place, Peter's brother John Shaver and two other men were both decapitated and found in the same location that Peter's body was found in. Less than a year after these deaths, a Mr. Samuel Anderson swooped down and married Peter Shaver's widow. That was normal for the time period. You can't leave a woman out in the middle of nowhere with all of this stuff. Not when there's Indians attacking, rumors of war, separation from England coming about. So it kind of makes sense. So with this, Samuel Anderson got the dowry of the Shaver family. And walking into another spider, because that's what we do here, we walk into spiders. We're going to just bypass him, and I'm going to continue talking. So like I said, Anderson, well, he got the dowry of the Shaver family and put it to good use. He became the local farmer who had all the horses, all the cattle, and all the hogs you could possibly want. So if you were running into a situation where you needed a horse, you can go to Sam. You needed a hog, tough winter, you can go to Sam. One of your cattle died, or you want to increase your herd, go to Sam.
Curiously enough, this Sam Anderson fellow might have been a little more sneakier than we thought. Apparently, Peter and John both purchased their properties directly from him by deed that was granted to their father a long time before. Kind of curious when you think about how they died and how he gained all that property back and the dowry of the Shaver family. Curious indeed.
At some point, the story continues to say that there was the finding of Indian burial graves off of the Conrad Butcher farm, and all the way, which is about a mile above Alexandria, all the way down and through the Water Street Narrows. So you could see a potential problem that was developing here. In 1762, Fort Standing Stone, a stockade fort, was erected all the way over in Huntingdon, about 12 miles away from this location. It was put up because of all the attacks on the settlers in the area, where the Indians were just out to kill the whites. It's that simple. Aside from the stockades giving the settlers a place to hide during alerts and alarms of Indian attacks in the area, it also created a situation where the Indians never attacked the stockades. Quite simply because the garrisons within the stockades were formidable. They had no chance against them. And we have another spider. Hey there, buddy. In 1773, Bartholomew McGuire and his wife Bridget moved out of Ireland and settled right off of the Shaver Creek area. They had a little homestead that they set up, and it was referred to as McGuire's Field. What you see around me here is McGuire's Field, or at least part of the homestead. This particular location is now part of the state game lands of Pennsylvania. Beautiful location, very, very thick forest, lots of animals still around here, a little bit of a thunderstorm blowing on the other side of the mountain. This location is just west of Logan Township at the base of Tussey Mountain. Even though the French and Indian War had ended a decade prior, and William Penn bought this property from the Indians nearly 2 decades ago, the Indians were still very hostile and very, very, very into getting rid of the white settlers. In 1775, the Revolutionary War broke out. Unfortunately, in this county, Huntingdon County, it was smack dab in the middle of that war. And, well, the Indians took the side of the British. And in that battle between the whites and the Indians, the whites were the sufferers. They didn't do very good at all. There was little to no chance of survival out this way unless you really knew what you were doing and knew where all the forts were. In 1777, the Indian depredations meaning massacres, absolute heinous cruelty, and repeated murders and attacks and destruction all around, was in full swing in this part of Pennsylvania. Nobody was safe. On June 18th, 1777, the Indians came through this area and they burned everybody's plantations. Nobody had any food left. Everything was gone. So everybody made the decision, well, time to get to the forts where it's safe. And that is where the story of the McGuire Massacre begins. On June 19th, Bartholomew McGuire, his daughter Jane McGuire, their neighbor Felix Donnelly, and his son Francis gathered up the last of their belongings and their cattle and began a drive from their home off the McGuire Fields to Fort Standing Stone, a 12-mile journey down the river of Juniata. Jane was leading the drive when the ambush happened. An Indian took a shot and immediately struck and killed Francis Donnelly. In order to make sure that he didn't get scalped, Francis Donnelly's father grabbed his body and held it to the horse. Bartholomew McGuire was right next to him, tightened up and held the other side so that the boy's body did not fall off that horse. A second ambush took place. The Indians shot and killed Felix Donnelly. He fell to the ground with the body of his dead boy. Another shot grazed Bartholomew McGuire's ear and took a lock of his hair and threw it through the air, as the story's told, which caused him to lean forward on his horse, and his horse raced past his daughter Jane, who was leading. Jane found herself in a particular situation that wasn't good. Dad just rode by on the horse, hunched over on the horse, and one of the Indians grabbed her. He yanked her down, and it's believed that they were going to probably keep her as a prisoner, which was the way things kind of went back then. But things didn't work out for the best for the Indians. Jane's tether to her dress was frayed, a little bit worn out, which would have been atypical for a farm working girl in a particular area like this. So it ripped, and she was able to wriggle out of her dress. This is where it gets interesting. So Jane wriggled out of her dress and grabbed a hold of one of the cow's tails. While holding on to the tail, the cow had so much fright that with frightening speed it raced past Bartholomew McGuire, with Jane still holding its tail all the way down to the fort. That's the story. And that story comes directly from Bartholomew McGuire, who recited that story at the fort. Now Bartholomew was able to recompose himself, turn around on his horse, and effectively aim his rifle at the Indian who was going to chase him. The Indian scattered off into the bush. The rest of the story goes that they made it to the fort successfully and safely. But before they made it to the fort, the Indians' gunshots were heard by a couple of workers at Crider's Mill that was on the other side of the river. The guys jumped into a canoe and immediately came to the aid of the whites. When they got here, they couldn't find anything, but did a final escort of Bartholomew McGuire all the way to the Fort Standing Stone in Huntington. When they reached the fort, everyone told the tale, and half of the garrison got together and came looking for them Indians. When they got here, the trail ran cold, so they abandoned looking for them, and those Indians were never found. So here is the location where Bartholomew McGuire is buried. Now, there are other stones here, and it's not whom you might expect. We actually don't know who these people are, but we do know that there are approximately 25 to 30 different stones and lots. None of these stones are readable. None of them are marked. They're just marking a headstone location. This particular site was established in the late 1790s. It is officially known as McGuire Cemetery. Pose to you this. Next time you see a little graveyard off to the side of the road, a path that nobody's walked in a long time, maybe the remnants of a foundation of some building, ask yourself, what story, what adventure, what spiders on my eyes did those people actually have? Let's get this guy home. I want to thank you very much for coming along on Scott's Odyssey. I'm going to continue to try and bring you content like this, where we take those little roads that nobody else takes. We go see those little things that nobody else sees. Abandoned locations, old graveyards, foundations of historic buildings, and crazy stories along the way, maybe even some haunted. If you get a chance, leave a comment. Tell me what you'd like to see. Tell me what you liked or didn't like about this video. And while you're at it, do me a favor. Click subscribe. That way I can take you on more adventures of the things that are unseen, places off the beaten trail, places at times forgotten. And, with a little bit of luck, give you the history. Anyway, that's all for now. Got to get back into a safe place before the storm actually takes me out because, well, lightning's striking. But anyway, thank you very much. Thank you for watching. Please click subscribe, and I'll see you on the next adventure.